One. Hello, my name is Lorenzo Steele Jr., former New York City correction officer, and I've worked inside the nation's most violent adolescent jail in the nation. I have served 12 years from 1987 to 1999, Rikers Island's most violent and bloody years. My first guest is also a retired female correction officer by the name of Mercedes Nunez Steele, also my wife. And she's going to share what it's like to be a female correction officer in a male dominated environment. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, Mercedes.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be
Um,
here.
you're lucky because this is episode one, and you're my first guest, and so I'm honored to have you on the show. And I know that the information that you're going to share with the audience is going to be impactful and also empowering. Um, Basically, I have a few questions I want to ask you. We're going to reflect on the time 1987 to 1999. That's the time that I served in Rikers Island C-74 ARDC, which was an adolescent detention center slash adults, meaning we had adolescents and we had adults. There was some days you might work with the adolescents, some days you might work with the adults. Okay. What we're going to do with this show is a lot of people don't realize what takes place inside inside jail, especially as a female correction officer. So my
Mhm.
first question to you is, can you tell me a little about yourself and why you became a corrections officer?
Okay. Well, I became a correction officer February 4, 1988. That's when I started the Corrections Academy. Of course, back then was a great paying job. You didn't need a college degree. And just the fact that you could retire within 20 years was an incentive. So I did like about 7 weeks in the academy. In March of 1988, maybe mid-March, I was assigned to ARDC, C-74, to begin my career as a correction officer.
Okay. What made you want to become a correction officer? Did you just
Once
wake up
again,
one day and say, I want to be a correction officer? Did you dream about being a correction officer? Share that with us.
no, not at all. I don't think anyone dreams becoming a correction officer. I think, or at least from my perspective, I went in because of the benefits and the money. It was a very good paying job. The benefits were great. And just the fact that you can retire within 20 years was an incentive.
Okay. Now, let me ask you something. How old were you when you first walked through those doors in Rikers Island?
I was 22, 22, 22 years old, and that summer I turned 23. So 22, I was.
Wow. So you was very young. So let me ask you a question. Were you afraid walking through a jail which had murderers, rapists, everything that you could find, um, all the violators of all the rules and the laws in that one environment? Were you afraid?
Well, I can say initially, yes, I was afraid. Not having any exposure to jail whatsoever, not knowing anything, not knowing what I was getting into. Like I said, once again, just the fact that the money was good, the benefits were good. But I must admit, that first year was the hardest. As a female working with the males, a lot of them were very disrespectful. I mean, I've had inmates threaten me. Of course, you have the inmates who try to talk to you, try to impress you. So it was a little scary, but once I got to C-74, and I mean, everyone there stuck together, and I think the male officers really backed the females up. So the inmates were pretty much in check, because if they disrespected one of us, it wasn't going to be a pretty scene.
Let me ask you something. When you say disrespectful, what do you mean by disrespectful?
Well, disrespectful, I mean, curse that, inmates would curse at us, the regular whistle, trying to talk to you. I had an incident one night. I was working the midnight shift, and I was working in an adolescent dorm, and I was taking my counts. So I had all the inmates go to their bed, and as I was walking down counting the inmates, I had this one young man just take his private part and put it up and like a joke. And once again, everybody around him started laughing because it was funny. So I had to let that young man know, because he did it to me a couple of times, that if we had a little box, which was an alarm, if I pressed that alarm, it wasn't going to be a pretty scene.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. Well, describe what would a 8-hour tour be like, female from your female perspective.
Well, you're in the housing area. Once again, 74. All the jails are kind of set up a little different.
Mm-hmm.
74 had a combination of cells and dorms. I can say the dorms was the worst. I hated working the dorms. It's 3 offices. One would be like they call the bubble, which is the office in the middle.
Yeah.
Then you have 2 sides on the left and on the right, and you have an officer on each side. And especially the midnight tour, it was really hard because you had to sit there. If you're not accustomed to being like up at night, it was hard trying to stay up. And then, just monitoring the inmates, and no one tried to escape or to hurt or to stab another inmate. And like I said, the cells were a little different, but the cells only had 1 officer during the midnight, I should say. During the day, during the day was bad too, honestly speaking, because I hated it. That first year was my toughest year, and I hated it with a passion.
Let me ask you something. You said the word violence. I used to work there too, from 87 to 99. And a lot of people don't realize at that time, 87 to 99, those are the most violent and bloodiest years in Rikers Island history. Sometimes we used to average 30 to 40 razor slashing, as you know. But the regular general public does not know this. But can you describe what was it like when you had your first incident? We know they fight, we know they cut, we know they stab.
Yes.
What was your first incident like in jail?
In jail. Okay, so I remember 3 separate incidents. One incident involved an inmate that was really considered dangerous. I know he was a Hispanic inmate. I can't remember his name, but he had to be shackled whenever he got moved. And I believe I was working maybe, I don't know what, I can't remember the terminology, but it might have been the Bing, or I know all the inmates, all they had was a suicide inmate that would walk up and down the corridor, making sure the inmates did not hurt themselves. Anyway, there's one Hispanic inmate that was known to cut, and he had the shackles, he had the cuffs, and I don't think we had gloves back then, because that was like in 88.
I don't think so. Yeah, no
Yeah,
gloves.
but
Yeah.
the thing was that usually that inmate who was called the suicide watch, that was just a regular inmate that would get paid a few pennies to walk up and down and make sure that none of the inmates that were locked in for 23 hours out of the day would hurt themselves. Well, they were bringing this Hispanic inmate back. I'm not sure if it was from court or the business. I can't remember, but I remember him coming in. At that point, the inmate that was a suicide watch was now locked between the A and the B gate. And the inmate, I don't know where he got the razor. That was my first time I saw an inmate spit out a razor and just started slashing the inmate's face. I mean, there was blood everywhere.
Wow.
And yeah. So
what did you do? How did you react? Everybody doesn't see blood every day. And when I talk and do speaking engagements, I use the word desensitized. Desensitized to me means, you see something so much over and over constantly that it almost becomes normal, that you could actually continue seeing it like it wasn't even
Right.
there. Um, explain some of that. Was it day-to-day violence? You know, we got an audience out there. You know, they're very curious about what goes on in jail, and we especially want to target the youth because we want them to really realize what really takes place behind those walls. And coming from two former correction officers' perspective, this is going to be our platform. So what was it? What was it like when the guy got cut? How did the detainees act? How did the officers act? Go into that.
Well, the other inmates were locked in. Of course, this is one of those units where the inmates were locked
Oh, it
in.
was a cell
But
area. Okay.
yeah, luckily I had other officers there. There was a couple of officers that were escorting this inmate back. There was I think my captain might have even been there, a captain or a dep. I can't remember because I think
Uh-huh.
this inmate had to be escorted by a captain and a dep also.
Okay.
So I guess a dep came or the captain came into what we call the bubble. And honestly speaking, I was just in shock. I didn't know what to do. I had never seen anything like that, all that blood and that
Yeah.
cutting. So
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by the grace of God, I didn't have too many of those. Thank
Good.
God. I mean, I heard we used to have what they call alarms going off.
Oh
That's
yeah.
when officers got to suit up because there's a situation going on in one of the housing areas. We have many of those.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I know it was happening. And then the other incident that's vivid in my mind also
Mm-hmm.
was the officer being assaulted by an inmate. And he was all cut up and bloody, and they were wheeling him out in a wheelchair. And like I said, that was on my first year in '74, which I'm kind of glad that I went there because that meant that anything else would not be a shock to me.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And people don't realize, when we were there, we saw blood every day, blood
Hmm.
on the walls, blood in the cell areas, and I will never forget, the look on, a detainee's face that's coming to you, and he has a white T-shirt over his face, and he moves his face, and next thing you know, you're looking at cheekbone, sometimes teeth. It was a very violent place, and getting back to the theme of the show, did you feel protected while you were there as a female because you're in the cell area. A cell area is two areas. You have a north side and a south side, 33 to each side. So that's sometimes a total of 66 detainees. But if you're in a modular, for the people that don't know what a modular is, imagine a large room with 50 beds, no cells. Sometimes the beds are 2 feet across. You have a locker, so you have 50 individuals. Depending on the housing area that you're working in, it could be an adolescent dorm, it could be an adult dorm, but that's it. 50 on the north side, 50 on the south side. So you have a total of 100 detainees, 100 different personalities, and can you share your first experience? Let's say working a dorm area, you're in charge of 50 detainees for the night. You're responsible to supervise, meaning to making sure nobody gets hurt. What was your first night like when you're in a young, beautiful female and
Thank
you're
you.
assigned to supervise 50, let's go with grown men
Yeah.
that are used to running the streets, doing their own thing, and now they have to come into and comply to rules. What's that like?
Well, that was extremely hard. It was extremely hard for me. I mean, I was young. I was new, and trying to control that population and not really control, but kind of like it was care, custody, and care, custody, and
Hmm.
control to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Just ensuring that you didn't have any incidents on your tour. I remember that was one post I hated, honestly speaking, the dorms.
The
I
dorm.
I didn't
Hmm.
mind working the cell the
Yeah.
cell areas, but the dorms, it was
Hmm.
almost like the inmates was so free. They were like right there near you.
Uh-huh.
um I will walk around always with the thought, I have to be careful nobody tries to escape, because as we know, the dorms were not that that saved. Like
Mhm.
inmates could really escape. They were like, to me, they were like flimsy structures.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I had to pay attention. I had to pay attention, make sure there was no fighting going on, no arguing, while I was there during my tour. And I saw a couple of my assignments in dorms, especially what would they call them? I think it's the newcomers, like the
Mhm.
adolescents. A
Mhm.
couple of times I would see those stronger inmates preying on the weaker inmates, the
Oh
new inmates
wow.
coming through. Yeah, I specifically remember one incident where this young man, Dominican kid, Dominican just like I am, I'm Dominican.
Mhm.
He was new and he's never been in prison and he was trying to sleep and I heard like a commotion. I didn't see it at first, and the young man jumps up and says, "Oh, these African American guys are taking matches." And what they would do back then, smoking was allowed, cigarettes and matches and stuff.
Mhm.
And they were taking the matches and putting like the matchstick between his toes and
Yeah.
lighting up the matchstick.
You call that,
And
used to
they
call
did it
that
to the
birthday
kid.
cake defeat. This birthday cake
Yeah.
defeat. That's what they used to call that.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
okay. I don't even know what it was. See, I
Uh-huh.
wasn't even familiar with that.
Yeah.
And it was just so hardy. So I had to like put my foot down. And mind you, I wasn't too much older than them. I mean, I was
Mhm.
older, but not too much older. But I had to
Yes.
tell them to stop and kind of threaten them. There would be consequences, leave them alone, and then kind of keep my eye on this inmate for the rest of my tour
Mhm.
so that they wouldn't there wouldn't be an incident because then we would have to write reports and the captain and Debs would be involved. It was
Mhm.
just too much.
Let me ask you something. I want to throw this question out. What was it like for let's stick with the adolescents. What was it like? Let's say you're in a adolescent dorm area, and there was a new adolescent that was coming through your doors. What would that first interaction be? That one detainee versus the other 49. What is that like? What goes on in that young man's mind going through that door for the first time?
Well, it depends because some of the kids coming through, they were regulars. They were
Hmm.
regulars and they would come back and it's like they knew the whole door. Oh, so and so, what's up? You back? Yeah, man, what's up? And so those inmates, I knew they were gonna be fine because
Hmm.
they were like regulars there. They had their crew. But then there was the other kids coming through. You could tell they would just look so scared. Some of them didn't have like sneakers back then. It was no uniform, so you could wear clothes. So you could tell the inmates that had like the crew because they were dressed, they had the nicest clothes, the sneakers. But then there were inmates that had to wear some orange, ugly looking sneakers. And
Air
usually,
patakis. They used to call those
yes,
air patakis.
okay. And usually that was a sign of a weak inmate because somebody took your sneakers or your family couldn't bring you any sneakers because they would be taken.
Wow. Let me ask you something. Has you use the word weak, weaker. Had did an inmate ever come up to you and say that they got robbed, they got um beat up or anything like that?
No, no, of course not. I mean, I would just pick up on little,
Mm.
I would just be a pick up because I'm one that I don't like for people to be bullied or picked on. I just don't like that. I mean, we never know. I was a correction officer then, and I mean, you never knew if one day you would have a family member going through there, and the last thing you will want is for someone to pick on your family member, regardless if the person is guilty or not.
Hmm.
I mean, yes, they'll have to deal with the consequences, but
Hmm.
to be like preyed on, I didn't
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Mm.
So I myself just try to keep myself just conscious of what was going on, aware of my surroundings. If I saw, inmates like talking to each other and looking at one inmate, and I saw that inmate looking scared, usually you could tell by the face. I would
Mm.
approach that inmate. I would kind of conversate with that inmate to get them to kind of open up. But they never really said anything. I never had an inmate come to me and tell me.
Wow, that's amazing. Because my time there from 1987 to 1999, I did some serious reflecting, and I can really honestly say that no one has ever um, come up to me and said, I got somebody stole my sneakers or somebody's extorting me or a situation like that. And we know it's going on. You said something that's very powerful. You said that as an officer, you were able to pick up on certain things. What can you elaborate on that word pick up? What does that mean to you?
Well, pick up, I can tell, like I remember a couple of times, at one time, in 74, back then, the inmates would go to the cafeteria to have lunch. And I saw a couple of drug deals going down, which I alerted the captains
Drug
right
deals?
there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's the sense that you kind of develop. As a whole, I've always been very observant. So if an inmate's getting pressure, I could pick up on the body language, the look on the face.
Hmm.
And like I said, even years later, when I eventually I was transferred, I worked a few jails, but when I was assigned to GRVC, I worked the visit there. And in the visit, I caught a lot of females bringing in drugs for their husbands, boyfriends, or
Hmm.
brothers, or whatever, or sons, or
Hmm.
whatever.
Wow.
And it was just watching their mannerism while they're waiting
Hmm.
outside in the little area to be searched to come in. I could usually pick up on it, or on packages. I was good with that. I was a mailroom officer also. I was able to recover a lot of drugs coming in that way too.
Mhm. Wow, that's the. Could you say every officer? Because how long we was in the academy for? How many weeks was that? Was that 16 weeks, 12 weeks?
No, well, no.
How
For
many
me, it was only
weeks?
7 weeks.
7 weeks in the academy.
Hmm.
Let me ask
Yeah.
you something. So in the academy, was there ever a class or a course on what to look for or cause you said pick up on, to sense when something is wrong. Is that a course, or you just have to be that type of individual that could actually develop an extra sense to know what's going on?
Yeah, I think that's something that we all have naturally. Some have it more than others,
Mm,
where you can sense, you can pick up on different mannerisms, different attitudes. There was no such class. I mean, at least I don't remember having such a class as such.
mhm,
But it's just, being observant and being aware, being
mhm.
very aware of your surroundings. You have to be on your P's and Q's when you work in the jail. You can't be
Wow.
lax, because that's when an incident's going to happen. Somebody's going to get cut. Somebody's going to get robbed. Anything can happen. I know I didn't want any incidents.
Mhm,
And except for that one incident in the Bing,
mhm.
for the most part, thank God, I didn't have incidents where I had to write reports, investigations.
Wow. Okay, wow. Have you ever worked in a receiver room? That was one of the receiver room is a place where the detainees come from central booking that have been remanded, couldn't make bail, so they had to wait their time inside Rikers Island. And I'll never forget the faces. During that time, 87 to 99, there were thousands of young black and brown faces that came to that receiving room, and I worked there many times. And I used to always, you hear the bus, the squeaking of the bus wheels, and then someone yells, "We got a bus here." Then the gate opens up, and you see the detainees coming in, shackled up. And I'll never forget those faces that came through that door. The looks on their faces, it's like you're in a new environment. And the sad thing, a lot of people don't realize that when you go into inside a jail or prison, there's no training manual for prisoners or detainees. You learn as you go. So I want to take the viewers inside the receiving room. Give me some some reflection on what was it like to see a young child. Adolescents at that time were, I think, what, 16 to 21 or 17 to 21.
16. It was 16
16 to
to
21 years
21.
old, and you was 22 years old. I was 22 years old, so we was
Hmm.
almost adolescents. ourselves. So what was it like, when you worked in a receiving room, as a female, and women are more sensitive than men. What was it like for you to be a female, seeing a young man coming through those receiving room doors for the first time?
Well, it was very, very sad because once again, I'm the type of person that I always think, you know, suppose I had a family member in that predicament.
Hmm.
So in 74, I really didn't work the receiving room like that. I mean, I think they had a Sally port. I don't know if it was a 74 Sally port, but I know I've worked the Sally port. That's where you open the gate to let the buses in or the buses out. Um, I did escorting. The only time I really might have worked the receiving room was when I was assigned to Rose and Singer, and that was with the females, and that's like a whole lot of story. At that point, as a female, we have to do the searching, and it's depressing. To me, it was very depressing because you have mothers and daughters and grandmothers coming through, women addicted to drugs. You hear the stories, what they did for their man, and that's how they got there. They lost their children. So that was depressing in itself.
Wow. Wow. So you've seen a lot. You did 20 years, and you actually retired doing 20 years. I did 12. I resigned after 12. I just couldn't, just
Yeah,
basically couldn't mentally take it anymore. But wow, that must be a monumental feat for a woman to actually come on a job. And like I said, it's a job that many cannot handle. It's not for everybody.
right.
And one thing, I always have to give back to the females, because a lot of people don't realize that it's a male dominant environment. But you have a lot of males that are afraid. There were
Yeah.
certain females, and you was one of them. You cared, and I felt protected working with you, and I know there was many others that felt protected working with you. Meaning that you had men, alpha males that would rather work with certain female officers. Sometimes they might be 5 feet, 5'4", or 140 pounds, but they knew that person, had their back. But yeah, that's just the type of environment.
Oh
If
yeah,
you,
it was tough, and I mean the reason I can sincerely say that I survived was because I was able to get away from where I don't know if I would have been able to do 20 years in 74 in the housing area. I'll be
wow.
quite honest with you. My first year was the toughest. I thought about quitting. I was like, this is insane. You are incarcerated just as much as the inmates are. So, but by the grace of God, I was able to move around to different divisions within DOC where my inmate contact was limited.
Mm,
And that's what helped me to get to my 20 years.
mm. Wow. Let me ask you another question. What would you tell because there's going to be a lot of young people that's going to be, watching this new Behind These Prison Wall podcast, parents with children. That's one of the reasons I created this platform, where you can really get a real hands-on visual images. The images that you're actually seeing are the actual images that I took as a photographer in C-74 at the time. What would you tell a young man that is out there, that's watching this, that that he or she need to know?
Well, I would just say stay out of jail, do the right thing, go to school, education. Education is the key. Get a high school education, get a college degree, and stay away from the streets, stay away from your friends and all the illegal stuff. Yeah, it might be all fun and games, but eventually everything comes to an end. And unless you want to be locked up with other men or other women for all day, like every year, a whole year, like holidays and summers, then you know what? You need to think about that. Just try it. Go lock yourself in a room and see what that feels like. And you're at home.
Mm.
I mean, just going to the prison is definitely not the way to go.
Okay. You said the word you brought up the word education. What's the connection between that you think that the connection between education and incarceration? There's a term called school to prison pipeline. Could you elaborate on how education is a main factor sometimes determining who goes to jail?
Oh, absolutely. Well, not having an education, unfortunately, in our high poverty neighborhoods, our high poverty schools, high minority schools, the education is lacking, to say the least. Our children are not really getting educated the way they should. Um, they're not being encouraged the way they should. And what happens is, because the support is not there in the schools, and of course, I know parents got to do their best too, but I think if it starts with the school, kind of like encouraging the kids, making the kids feel welcome, giving them, showing them life skills and alternatives to crime, then maybe kind of bring the parents in. I think we'd be able to stop the school to prison pipeline.
Hmm.
And it starts from young, because in third grade they start measuring, the kids that fail start measuring how many prisons they're going to build. They start
Wow.
kind of guessing. But I think that if we start like with preschool programs, a lot of community support for the children and the families alike,
Hmm.
we might be able to break the cycle
Okay.
of our children going to prison. I
Okay.
mean,
Wow. Okay. What would you tell parents that are um watching this podcast?
well, just like I said, education is important, parents. So my thing is, try to stay involved in your children's education. I know it's extremely hard, especially when you're working, or in some cases, parents don't have the way to get into school. The school's too far, don't have the means. But just encourage your children and monitor what they're doing. Keep that line of communication open with the schools. Find out about different programs. And I'm talking about from the time the kids are in pre-K, kindergarten. You need to start then, so that the children could develop a love for learning, a love for books instead of a love for crime.
Wow, that was beautiful on how you ended that. Wow,
Thank you.
definitely gonna have to bring you back because you did 20 years, I did 12 years, and there's no
Hmm.
way that we could share our experience in just 15 or 20 minutes. So there's definitely going to be
Sure.
some more episodes um, dealing with these topics. I just want to thank you for coming on the show. Like I said,
Sure.
you're my first guest, and you're
Okay.
definitely going to come back because
Okay.
it's we were there, and it's just us sharing our experience that could possibly keep someone from actually going through what we experienced. And we don't wish this on no parent to have a child that actually goes through those be subjected to those conditions and
Questions.
behaviors. So I want to thank you again, Mercedes Nunez Steele, my wife.
Well, you're
Um,
welcome.
this was my first broadcast, but it won't be my last. But we're going to end it on this.
Okay.
This broadcast was basically put together to inform and empower to keep individuals from out, because we cannot lose another generation to mass incarceration and incarceration. Peace.
Amen. Bye.
I'm going to end the podcast on my first book titled Behind These Prison Walls: Life Inside of Rikers Island. As a rookie officer, walking into the most violent adolescent prison in the nation was like a combat soldier being deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan for the first time. Neither the academy nor the prison scenes depicted on television could prepare me for the day to day, hour to hour violence, torment, and physical abuse that occurred on Rikers Island. I can still remember the first time I saw an inmate walking angrily down the corridor holding his face, which had just been violently ripped open with a single-edged razor blade. Every step he took left behind a trail of blood. I stood amazed and perplexed, but I didn't dare show that emotion in the prison out of fear that my fellow officers would think I was a punk. I could remember one veteran officer saying, "Rookie, get used to blood. This is what they do here. Welcome to the butcher shop." That is exactly what it was, a butcher shop, a place for people who were cut, stabbed, mentally abused inmates and officers. Imagine an inmate who just cut the face of another inmate telling you he cut the inmate just for fun and he was bored. Welcome to Behind These Prison Walls.